This is Paul Moon, director of the documentary Samuel Barber, Absolute Beauty, and you're listening to the 9th episode of a now very occasional podcast series in the film's afterlife called Capricorn Conversations, with people who would have fit right into that house named Capricorn where Barber and Menotti lived. I'm sitting here in the East Village of New York City with Pierre Brévignon, who stars in the documentary itself. And Pierre was the first author outside America to write a biography about Samuel Barber. Pierre, thank you for coming back to New York.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
What brings you here?
An altogether different story. It's not a biography, but I'm writing currently a novel, and some parts of this novel take place in New York. So instead of traveling to New York via Google Maps and Google Street View, I figured it would be a good idea to be on site.
Great. It was great having you here.
Yeah.
And I'm really looking forward to this conversation that recollects after quite a few years since we last talked about Samuel Barber in this context. I would love to know, first of all, if there is a story behind you creating this biographical book that added so much to the world of understanding. I assume that it has a lot to do with publishers and timing and
absolutely. The first idea when I began fiddling with the idea of writing a book about a musician I loved, Barber was not my first choice, actually. I thought about Copland, I must say. At the time, I had written 2 editions of Dictionary on Classical Music, but in a funny and anecdotal point of view. And I wrote also articles for the Opéra de Paris programs, and I wrote critics of disc and concert reviews in magazines and on websites. And I really wanted to, I felt sufficiently confident enough to tackle a real big book and supposedly important book on a subject that was close to my heart. And having worked in the publishing business before writing books, I knew that an important thing was anniversaries, or so I thought at the time. And the closest anniversary that was coming was not Copland, it was Barber's. So I thought, well, after all, I like every work I know of Barber's. I saw that all of his works had been recorded at the time of their creation, their premiere, but also with a younger generation of musicians up to the day I was researching Barber. So I thought maybe there's something to explore here, because this music is not only music of the 60s, 70s, 80s, it's also music performed nowadays by young American, but not only American musicians. So it's alive, and strangely enough, you had nothing on Barber in France. You had biographies of Bernstein, but Barber wasn't covered by researcher, critics. So I forgot Copland, and I began to research Barber. I managed to have a publisher interested, and so it was set. I began to work on the book in 2007-8, I guess, and the idea is to have the book published by 2010 for the 11th anniversary of Barber. But things got complicated, to say the least. Because I'm very slow. I'm a slow worker, I'm a slow researcher, I'm a slow writer. And the more I delved into Barber's life and music, the more I wanted to explore and add other details. And at the same time, I had imposed to myself a challenge. And this challenge was, I was almost sure that somewhere in France, another writer at the same time was writing a biography on Barber. I had discovered on a French classical forum a thread by a man whose name, wasn't mentioned. It was just a pseudonym. But I had found a thread of like 20 to 30 pages of like biographical sketches on Barber, and it was pretty interesting, well written, and you felt that the guy has an intimate connection to barbers. So in my mind, it was obvious that this man had made the same calculation as I, and as he was writing a book for 2010. So for 3 to 4 to 5 years, each time I was in a library, especially in New York or Philadelphia, I looked on the register, if there was a name, a French name of someone who would have been there before me, and I really didn't manage to shake off this feeling that I had the breath of another French writer on my neck, you know. So it was kind of strange and very paranoid. And when I was interviewing people, I tried by several different and mischievous way to know if, by any chance, they would have met another French writer before me, or well, okay. So eventually, my book was published with 1 year of delay. So it was the end of 2011. So it wasn't for the 100th birthday of Barber birth, but rather the 30th birthday of anniversary of Barber's death, and a few weeks. Well, I had the luck of having gotten great reviews on my book, so I was quite happy for that. And a few weeks after my book was published and the reviews began to come, I got back to the forum to see if anyone was talking about my book, and I saw a message by this mysterious man who wasn't speaking of my book, but he was making a review on a very good review of my book. And it was very strange, and he said, "Oh, well, it's strange because the journalist says very nice thing about this book, and at the same time, he gives only 4 stars out of 5 to the book. So it mustn't be that good, And end of the paranoid era, maybe 6 months later, I go to the Wikipedia article, Barber, and I realize that there's a new work added to the list of works. And as you know, anyone can change an article on Wikipedia. But the work was, I would say, plausible. It was a work for flute and piano. The title was in French, and as you know, Barber was fluent in French. And it was at the time where he had met Manfred Ebel, who was an amateur flautist. So it made sense, he wrote the canzone for flute and piano for Manfred, so why not another piece for him? And the French title was very enigmatic. It was Scorvac est mort. Scorvac is dead. I had absolutely no idea who Scorvac could be, so I began to pick my phone and call people and experts and scholars, including Barbara Heimann, to ask her, but do you know if Barber knew a man named Scorvac? No, she didn't think there was such a man in Barber's life. Besides, he told me, I've never heard of the work, so it may be a joke, a prank. And I did some research on the word Scorvac, and Scorvac, it exists. It's an English slang. And it's the name one gives to a third nipple, strangely enough. But it's also the name you give to someone who is, at a date between two lovers. There's a third person arriving, and no one wants her to be there, and she's the Scorvac. Well, it didn't help me to understand what this work was, but I realized that it must have been my own personal nemesis, the man of the forum, who added this work in the article just to make my biography look outdated, so soon. So, it ended the paranoid era for me. I promptly erased the title from the list of works, and well, that was the end of my relation as a writer to Barber. And then after that, you have to live with your love for Barber, for his music. I had the chance to meet you, and I had the pleasure to work on your documentary. So it was like a baton, that was passed from one mother to another.
I heard you say that you have difficulty finishing and projects and slow.
Yeah.
So I personally imagine that maybe the spirit of Samuel Barber was this writer over your shoulder.
Oh, maybe it was
egging you on to get it done faster, to beat the other
I
artificial nemesis.
I had this picture. I had bought in New York photos of Ruth Orkin.
Mm-hmm.
She had taken a picture of young Barber, sit against a tree trunk,
with the cigarette, right?
And he has a cigarette, and he's looking straight into the camera, and he likes waggle his finger, saying, well, I guess he was joking with Ruth Orkin, but when I saw him, in my office, I had the impression that he was telling me, you better hurry, you're missing my anniversary.
Sure, yeah. Well, I know that there's far too much information and to even scratch the surface when it comes to what's in your book. But it's a healthy question to ask and interesting to know in hindsight. What did your book add to the existing scholarship on Samuel Barber at the time, and maybe even still now? Because you brought a different perspective than others would have.
Well, I think I brought, to speak largely, I brought a European perspective, and that wasn't far-stretched because, as you know, Barber had a love for Europe, the culture and the music of Europe. And my point, really, for the French reader was to show that Barber's music was relevant for European listeners and musicians. I guess if I had wrote a book on Copland, the perspective would have been almost exclusively American.
Mm-hmm.
With Barber, it's reductive. So that's why I wanted to interview lots of musicians from Europe. I had the sheer luck to gather the memories of Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau, for instance, who was the commissioner and who premiered the last of the song cycles by Barber, and he told me very moving and interesting things. That's what I wanted, to show that Barber's music had its place in European concert halls,
Specifically, you mentioned he was fluent in French. It might just be the product of being a Renaissance man, a well-educated man. But besides that, is there any clues that you can give us that he was literally sort of a hopeless Francophile? Besides the friendships he had?
Oh, okay. I guess, we all agree that Barber was a bit snob, and for him, speaking French, having French friends, was a sign of refinement and elegance. Well, he was naturally elegant, but his closest friend, or his two closest French friends, were Francis Poulenc, which was, we say in France, in French, un titi parisien. That is a guy, of the suburbs of Paris, even if Poulenc was from a very wealthy family, But he had this hair of a guy like, a guy. Not a gentleman, but a guy. And the other very good friend was a baron, Henri Louis de Lagrange. So with Henri Louis de Lagrange...
Well, that would be the person who also
wrote
quite a lot of Mahler.
Absolutely. And Mahler was the reason why, that's strange to say, but that's Lagrange who told me that, was the reason of the drift between Barber and Lagrange. When Lagrange told Barber that he was going to write a mammoth biography and several volumes about Mahler, Barber would tell him, "But you're wasting your time."
Is it rivalry as to the other composer, or could it be a distaste for Mahler, which I actually would kind of...
I mean, Mahler has never been among the list of the composer that Barber revered, you know. He adored Brahms, as you know. He adored Wagner also. But Mahler has never been among his taste.
Well, yesterday we attended a concert of Barber's summer music here in New York City, and it was paired with the wind quintet of Poulenc.
Yeah.
And I would say these composers are often paired together in concerts.
Yeah.
How did they pair in real life? I mean, for example, are they similar to their respective countries in terms of when they arrived, what kinds of music they wrote? How
interesting. I would say the main difference was that from a very early age, Barber was not interested in writing American music. You know, he became one of the most important composers of America, but that was not his point at all. And we could even stretch the thing, saying that most and foremost, he tried not to emulate, but to get inspiration for the great masters of European music. I mean, Bach, Brahms, Beethoven.
Well, then tell me about Poulenc.
And Poulenc he only wanted to write French music, you know, not in a patriotic way, you know, but he wanted to how could I say, find the sounds of French countries, French countryside also. When you think of his Concert Champêtre, when you think of his songs, you know, many are about Paris, about the cities, and that's really what you wanted to be a musician, a composer. Des faubourgs, you know, of the faubourg. Not a bourgeois composer, but someone. Well, you know, that's a funny thing. I happened to organize a concert in France with Barber's music, of course,
as seen in the film. Yes, because the Rosamond Quartet plays. The Quatuor Rosamond, is it?
Quatuor Rosamond, yeah. They performed the whole repertoire of string quartet, which is not big, but the three works for string quartet paired with Brahms and Webern, I guess. Yeah, not Webern. Sorry, Ugo Wolf. But no. I thought about the another concert of songs, piano voice. And I had paired Poulenc with Barber, and I had found interesting photos for the poster and the program. On one, you saw Barber at a cocktail, you know, with very elegant, with a bow tie, and he was seated just next to Marlene Dietrich, you know, and she looked bored to death, you know. Well. And the other photo, the other picture that I put just under the Barber pic was of Poulenc in a cafe in Paris, and he has, you know, his elbow on the counter, and he's joking with the guy behind the counter, you know, and he has a glass of wine, you know. And I titled the concert Le dandy et le voyou. You know, so it sums up finally the main trait of Barber, for me at least, and the main trait of Poulenc's music. An easy music. That is not to say an easy listening music, but it's something that is pleasing to the ear immediately. And at the same time, you have dissonant notes, you have vigorous rhythms, and it can be. By the way, the guy yesterday at the concert introduced the sextet by Poulenc by saying it could sound a little harsh, you know, and I found it surprising because it is, I guess, the most seductive music you can hear. You know, it's funny and it's fun. and it's beautiful.
I hear that. Yeah. Well, we may think of this is honestly. I love to also see what a biographer, how a biographer feels about their subject as a human, not just in the musicological sense and so on. So you got to know him after spending so much time with Barber. So, I mean, this place called Capricorn, this house, was the setting of gatherings of artists, composers, musicians, and so on. This is a small question, but what impression would you have walking in there and seeing Barber? Would he recede into the background and be a quiet person, or would he an introverted person?
No.
That his music suggests?
Yeah.
Or did you find out in your research that he was kind of more in the opposite direction that his music implies?
I would say that, Barber lived with Menotti at Capricorn, and not only did they work and create each one in a separate wing, at Capricorn, but they also organized parties, and sometimes quite crazy parties. And the two of them at their part, it was not a good guy, bad guy, good cop, bad cop, but it was known that Menotti was the joyous person who liked to make people happy and love, and Barber on the other side would play the not the opposite part, but he was more wry, he had a sense of humor that could hurt sometime, and I have discovered some testimonies, some memories of person who were at the parties, saying, for instance, that sometimes Barber couldn't support the noise, the frivolity, and he had to retreat in the restrooms, and he just asked that regularly a guest, brings him a cocktail in the restroom.
Into the bathroom, just stay in there.
Yeah, because there was too much noise, too much people, But all in all, I think that at the end of his life, mainly, Barber was a lonely person. But even if he was more subdued than Menotti is, and probably that tons of people were more subdued than Menotti, he was quite happy to have people around him, to have, it was important that even if the Capricorn is, as you know, pretty secluded house, in the countryside, Barber always said, he was a boy of the countryside. So even if the house they chose to buy and inhabit for 40 years, I guess, was in the middle of almost nowhere, it was important for Barber and also for Menotti to have the possibility to bring back friends, and it happened quite often, almost every weekend,
Also, a fun kind of trivial question, really, is also to just to tease the idea. We were just at the Metropolitan Museum of Art today, and that experience of going to any art museum, these are all wonderful works of art, but everybody gravitates to certain rooms and certain artists and certain paintings. So just personally, which rooms do you think Barber would have wandered into and spent the most time in, and which artist, which painting? One can only guess.
Well, my feeling, is that as refined and beautiful and moving Barber's music was, I'm not sure he had a great taste in arts, Yeah.
Tell me more.
Well, I won't personally tell you, but I know that Italo Calvino, I found in a letter by Calvino, the Italian writer, a recollection of a party at Barber's and Menotti's house, and he was saying they have absolutely no taste at all. That means they have all the taste, So he was pretty horrified by the way the rooms were decorated. They could be, wonderful sculpture by Marino Marini, Henry Moore, I guess, too, and at the same time, very, very ugly masks on the wall, and very naive paintings. Oh, you know what? I don't I don't want to sound rude because I know you love him, but and of course he's an interesting painter. But maybe Barber would have gone to the room where he would have seen paintings by the Douanier Rousseau.
Mm-hmm.
That could have been that.
Okay. Yeah. I'd love to just simply talk about some pieces of music, and again, each piece could itself be, and you do in your book, really dissect these different pieces. But it kind of in the context of the fact that there actually was a CD of archival recordings that originally came with your book. I'm just to list them. It was the Adagio for strings, then it was the Symphony in One Movement, the Violin Concerto, the Capricorn Concerto, and then ended with Souvenirs.
I think I may have included Dover Beach.
Yeah. Okay.
Probably,
yeah. Any of these resonate in particular with you? I think Adagio for strings is automatic, but beyond that.
The program of the CD in my book, I had the luck to set it up myself. With the help of I'm sorry, I forgot his name, but the guy who was pivotal and in the making of this big box set of Barber's archives. So I'm sorry, I forgot his name, but he said basically choose whatever you want.
Yeah. So why these choices?
Well, because I wanted to. I wanted to offer. Well, first of all, I wanted full works. I didn't want except one movement of a symphony, one movement of a concerto, and I wanted. Well, I think I just picked the performances that I liked the most, and especially because at the time it wasn't available. The Souvenir by this duo of pianists, absolutely amazing, so amazing that I can't remember their name. Mm-hmm. Tell me who they were. The Boys.
Well, my favorite recording is with Leonard Slacken playing along with John Browning, but that came later than probably this archival recording.
Golden Fitzgerald.
I see.
Okay, so you've heard of them? You know them?
Sure.
Okay, so as you know, they were not only brilliant pianists, they were also partygoers, and they were very fond of cooking, and I think. Among their achievements, you have not only have you great recordings for piano duo, you also have a book of recipes, and I think they also have written a biography of Misia Cert. I have to check, but so you see they were all over the place, and this work Souvenir is very often performed and recorded. Even nowadays, I've never heard a performance so moving and so to the point that this version by Golden Fitzgerald, because it has everything Barber asked. He wrote extensive program notes for this work. Including like little cinematographic programs for each movement. Saying, the first movement, it is set in an hotel, in the ballroom. This one is, so for me, Souvenir is as close as you get of a soundtrack for a film that doesn't exist, You and I, we don't understand why Barber never get to write film music. This is only film music, only the film doesn't exist. And Golden Fitzgerald, they are absolutely perfect. They are frivolous, but they're also very deep. There's a slow movement called, is it Hesitation Tango? No, I'm not sure.
I can't recall, but I remember a tango somewhere. Yeah.
But a slow movement that is dramatic, really. I mean, you think of the dance contest in the Depression era, for instance. For me, it's this music,
It's interesting that you say that it's a bit of a mystery that he never wrote for Hollywood. That industry was developing in his lifetime. What he seems to be most programmed frequently is his pure music, his symphonies and concertos and these types of things. His attempts to fuse his own compositions with drama or dance or operatic forms, I think there are a lot of people who say that wasn't his strength. He did deliver Vanessa, which actually does leave some people unsatisfied, maybe opera goers, but it's revered in the canon as a great opera of his. But of course, we all know and need not repeat the story of Antony and Cleopatra.
Never heard of this, no.
And is that at the feet of Barber? Not exactly. Even the core composition, despite the surroundings of the opening of the Metropolitan Opera House. But yeah, is this something that you agree with, or at least think that Barber never really fit into the storytelling, whole storytelling? Now, granted, songs are storytelling, but those are more poetry, aren't there? They're settings of poetry.
Yeah,
Barber didn't take on the telling of whole stories quite successfely.
One could say so, yes. Maybe because as far opera is concerned, it was, of course, collective works, and eventually Vanessa, the libretto is by Menotti. Menotti was an expert in the field of opera, so it was almost as if it was Menotti telling the story, even if it's at the beginning, it's Isaac Dinsen story. So maybe Barber, I don't think he felt like stolen from the desire to tell a story. But in the end, the Vanessa was very long to get. The work was the libretto was stuck at a certain stage. Barber wouldn't compose the music, and I guess almost 1 year went by without any new addition to the score or the libretto. So the fact that it's a collective work, so of course you have as many chance to make errors that there are people contributing to your work, Collaborative, yeah. At the same time, I think it's a question of alchemy, as you know. For me, the Barber's best opera is Knoxville, summer of 1915, and it's not an opera, but it's the text is by James G. Barber discovered it's a long prose poem, very jazzy in its rhythm, and Barber discovered it reading, I guess, an anthology of like the poems of the year, and it immediately struck a chord, an intimate chord,
It's interesting you say that, because it seems as though you enter into literary rules when the mediums of opera and theater and even dance are now part of the recipe,
Yeah.
It reminds me, earlier this week we went to see a rearrangement, if you will, or a re-envisioning of some Schubert songs at the Park Avenue Armory that was named Doppelganger after the final song in that last of Schubert's song cycles. And your comment was it was opera.
Yeah,
but it certainly wasn't meant as a storytelling libretto, but the stage director ended up telling a pretty interesting story.
And in my opinion, it was not even a Reggae theater move, because when you read the lyrics of Schubert's song, the one selected for this evening, it makes perfect sense. The story told by Schubert in his song is almost literally taken by the stage director, Klaus Guth, and it makes something that looks like an opera. At least
there's music for a scene from Shelley that isn't really even bound to anything that...
from Shelley, you mean?
Yeah, no. There are these things that are not made for theatrical presentation, but simply exist on their own.
It could be, the Shelley music could be a ballet. Probably, I have to check, but it's possible that it has been choreographed, But these are examples of, like the essays for orchestra, of pure music. I'm not sure there is an impure music, but at least it's not even as for Shelley, the Shelley music. It's not even an argument. The Shelley is it's just a line or two in a poem of Shelley, I guess, and it was like the spark that ignited the flame. That was all,
Mm-hmm.
So,
I mean, I guess it leads to, I think what I'm thinking of alongside that is going to become especially timely, and it's always sort of dogged this legacy. It's very reductive to think about who are the great American composers, but we still think of pantheons as such. And there's going to be a movie coming out soon about the life of Leonard Bernstein. Samuel Barber will not get such a biopic, at least it seems for the foreseeable future, but in the mid 20th century, I think it's interesting to go back in time and think about how all of them were pretty big names, especially in a music world where the music that they were composing were, I guess you could say, pop music, or at least had a lot more a lot more play.
Yeah.
What did your research tell you about Barber's celebrity at the time? Sometimes it even comes down to the numbers, how often he was performed, how much he was celebrated, relative to Bernstein and Copland, in fact.
Even if Barber died convinced that his music would be forgotten and that he would be forgotten, as you said, the numbers are here. From his young age to his death, his music has always been performed, not only in America, also in Europe. And when he was the most depressed, that is in the 70s, the 10 or 15 last years of his life, he always complained that now the music had to be abstract and atonal, and that his music would disappear from the concert program. But every year, every end of year, the ASCAP published a ranking of the most performed composer in America. Barber was Barber was always in the top 3. So not only was he performed, but his works, earned the money, and so he has never fell out of interest. People always wanted to hear, and it's even, you could say, because of the adagio, but it's not only the adagio. I mean, violin concerto, cello concerto, piano concerto, Vanessa, all these summer music, all these works were performed on a regular basis, and I think the fact that Barber wouldn't acknowledge this reality tells a lot about how he felt disconnected from his time. Basically, as soon I have to check the date, but as soon as Boulez took the direction of was the conductor of the New York Philharmonic, that must have been in 73 or later, 73 I guess. Barber complained that it was the end of the music he loved, and that not only his music, but also all the classical composer of the romantic canon or classical canon would disappear from the program. And besides, at the time, Boulez was extremely vocal about his intention of almost cancelling Brahms, Beethoven, Bach.
I can't avoid asking you about Boulez. I think there's plenty in the documentary. One should just simply listen to your anecdote that actually revealed a story of Boulez telling Barber how to compose better. Yeah. But jokes aside, I mean, his influence on modern music in the time of Barber really did have that impact you're describing. What now can we do, reflecting back on that? Yeah. What did Barber really have to worry about? Things got better eventually, didn't they? And it almost, the timing is sad, one could say, isn't it?
I mean, it's as if Barber had taken too seriously, the anathemas of Boulez. or the dreams of of Boulez, you know.
The world domination that he was.
Of serial music and even when Schoenberg discovered the 12-tone composition, he said, was it him or Weber? No, I think it's Schoenberg, that he had found a way for German music to reign over classical music for 100 years, maybe 1,000, I don't know. Well, but even that, didn't happen. Not because dodecaphonism disappeared. It's still on. Composer still likes to write music with 12-tone rows, but it doesn't cancel the rest of the classical music, the tonal music. So it's pretty strange that Barber should have been that impressed by Boulez's threat, to think that it was over.
Was there even a continuity to this sort of preference of Boulez and contemporaries of his time who felt that way? In other words, how consistent were they in their preferences?
Well,
meaning they would conduct other composers
absolutely.
who were tonal and in the late Romantic tradition, like Barber.
The way, well, Boulez as a composer has always written serial music, some eventually palatable and some really hard to. I mean, the piano sonata or something, I really can't enter into this music. But for instance, Le Marteau sans Maître, it's a masterwork, and I like to listen to it. But as a composer, Boulez was pretty consistent. At the same time, that didn't. He could as a conductor conduct romantic music and liking it, So, and he was a big advocate of Mahler's. We can't omit that point, So under this angle, you could say Boulez wasn't entirely consistent, because if he was so sure that tonal music had to disappear, and I'm not sure he would have conducted Bruckner symphonies, for instance, or Wagner, or because what Boulez has conducted, apart from the Ring, of course, he also conducted Wagner's youth composition. This oratorio on the Apostles. I guess he also conducted overtures like Columbus overtures, So he was, as a conductor, he was much more open-minded than as a composer. And of course, there are several composers that Boulez would have never conducted. I don't know if you're familiar with this French composer named André Jolivet. Okay. He wrote absolutely gorgeous music for flute and orchestra, and he was, you could say, an official composer, but Boulez was another kind of official composer. Anyway, there was a big fight between Jolivet and Boulez, ignited by Boulez, and Boulez ended up insulting Jolivet and telling him that he was a joli navet. It's a stupid pun saying he was a beautiful turnip, whatever. But okay, so all jokes aside, of course, Boulez would never, for the life of him, conduct this kind of composers.
Well, closer to home, did Poulenc ever express or articulate a sort of idea of suffering under that climate himself, or did he not care? Or did he not need that gatekeeping?
When Boulez, Poulenc, he died in '63, I guess.
I see.
When Boulez arrived, it was in the 50s, 60s. Yeah. We'll have to check his date. Anyway, but when Boulez was at the peak of its power, it was in the 70s, 80s, and Poulenc was dead. Poulenc has always been a favorite of concert programmers in France, so there was never tensions between the two.
I think going back to the game or riddle of what would it be like to see Barber in a social setting, even at Capricorn. I think another thing that's interesting is the book that you wrote, a short book after your biography.
Yep.
It might have been a break from the
Yeah.
enormity of the biographical project. It was about the French group of six.
Yes.
Among them was Poulenc.
Yeah.
Love to hear, first of all, who the six were, and were they all composers or not? I recall that they're not. But also, would Barber have even been a candidate or invited or enjoyable in that mix?
No, to answer your question, the six were a group of 6 young musicians that Jean Cocteau created basically from scratch at the beginning of the 20s. And well, Cocteau has a sort of superpower, as a promoter, and in a few months' time, he made from these 6 unknown composer like trailblazers of new music, and
so like Andy Warhol in this neighborhood.
Well, if you want, but Andy Warhol, he lasted longer than the 6. The 6 just lasted like 3 years, if you're generous, and then each one had its own career, and the only 3 who had real, I don't know if this is the term, but enduring career were Honegger, Darius Milhaud, and Poulenc. And I mean, they're absolutely great composers, there's no question. The 3 others were much less successful. There was a woman named Germaine Taillefer, and I seem to remember that she died in the US. She lived in the US for a time. I guess she died there. Another guy named Louis Duret, whose music is very, very, very interesting. He's generally the less known of the 6, but you have to check his chamber music, And the last one was Georges Auric, who had an official career in the music administration in France, and who's barely known for his film scores for Jean Cocteau movie,
What was the intrigue of documenting and telling the story of the group of 6? Did they have riotous meetings? Were they influential in their time?
Well, there were riots, but generally they were launched by Satie. Satie was like the father-in-law of the 6, and he was so bitchy. He kept telling terrible things to one of the 6, saying, that Honegger told this about you, and it, of course, it created tensions between them, but they were friends first and foremost. So there was really never a fight between them. The only fight, and it was barely a fight, was the day Louis Duret decided to leave the group after maybe 1 year, and he decided to leave the group because he couldn't stand Cocteau anymore. Cocteau was everywhere. And Cocteau was basically trying to explain to the composer how they should write music, And Duret, he was fed up with that. So one day he said, "Okay, I'm out of here." And that's the funny thing, that Duret left. Cocteau began to ask to the other composer, "Okay, now we are known. You are known as Le Groupe des Six. But there's only 5 of you, so who could be the new 6? And they didn't think of anyone. So Cocteau said, "Well, okay, so you're only 5, but if in any case, if there are pictures taken of you by journalists, just tell me, and I'll be the 6, So this was the kind of mindset, of Cocteau.
I mean, to clean up my silly question, then, let's say that I'm a casting agent and I insist that you must cast Barber as the 6th member in this case. How would this guy function in this group?
Oh, well, for sure. I'm pretty sure that there would have been a fight between Cocteau and Barber. Pretty sure of that. But some of Barber's music could have fit. Maybe summer music, could have been performed in the sixth concert. And if you think of it, remember Menotti's Festival of the Two Worlds in Italy? He organized some kind of evening of music, of cabaret music, and maybe it could have been a good fit for the six. And who knows? Maybe they would have been. They would have played after the concert after Barber with Barber, and something could have occurred of that. It's a possibility.
Well, when you spend so much of your life as a biographer, such a gigantic project as you took on, sometimes these lead to second editions. Barbara Heyman just had her second edition. Sometimes that's because of interesting intervening events.
Yeah.
I think for the first time she told you yesterday the story of a dumpster suitcase that was discovered that added to more fuel for a second edition. I don't think there's a compelling need for a second edition after your work, but I guess as another tease, what if you could? Or to say another way, it's a two-part thing. Is first, how have your own personal thoughts changed over the years? What would your preface read to a second edition? But also, what new information do you have, if at all?
Hey, as I told you, after the biography, maybe 3 to 4 to 5 years passed when I was completely immersed in Barber's music, as an aftermath. And then a strange phenomenon occurred. It is that I almost turned the page, and so I'm not very up to date with the new development of Barber's research, If I had to imagine a second edition, well, first of all, I would read my previous edition and try to add something. I don't know. To expand the relationship between Barber and the other person of his entourage, that's. I mean, as a human being, he was so deep and deeply connected. All the people I've interviewed during my research were absolutely fascinating people, so I would want to give even more justice to their relationship to Barber. But if I had to write another second edition, I will spend a year in the dumpsters of New York, searching for new suitcases full of documents on Barber.
I look with admiration, though, at the history of book publishing and the way that they used to support these types of massive projects, where you really could dedicate years of your life to a single study like this. And, it does feel like an art form that is endangered or is maybe even extinguished or extinguishing. It is a great thing what you did to really thoroughly just spend so much time and energy.
And there's a very, very good reason to that. It's that Barber is fascinating. It's someone you want to know.
Great. Well, Pierre, it was great to follow up.
It was a pleasure.
But I think people, now granted, the status of this great biography is that it remains a French language biography. Yep. There is no English translation.
No.
But of course, you are writing now a fiction novel for the first time. Yeah. And so I hope that will be translated and finished.
And then I could just, take, by the way, there is this biography of Barber. You could translate it too.
Yeah. Or maybe someone will egg you on with a edit to a Wikipedia entry that will push you to finish the
another work. Yeah.
Thanks, Pierre, for updating us.